we'll be discussing our favourite Christmas movies and songs. This is your Saturday Night Showdown. And discussing all tonight's topics, my brilliant panel. Joining me tonight, Cressida Wetton, Steve N. Allen and Jonathan Cogan. Let's get your latest news headlines first, though, from Sophia.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters have been rallying in central London.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
The demonstrators were urging Christmas shoppers to boycott what they say are pro-Israel brands. Traffic on Oxford Street was brought to a standstill as crowds chanted, "Don't fund genocide." Security guards blocked the entrance to fashion shop Zara, while dozens of officers followed the march. Police say there were no arrests. Meanwhile, today's been dubbed Super Saturday, tipped to be the busiest in-store shopping day of the year. Last year, shoppers were said to have spent over £1.5 million buying last-minute Christmas gifts. The Great Christmas Getaway is well and truly underway. The AA says it's the busiest day of the pre-Christmas period, with an expected 16.5 million extra cars on the road. Travellers have been facing delays by road and by rail, with train passengers dealing with cancellations. More disruption is expected tomorrow as London's King's Cross and Paddington stations close for engineering works. Travel expert Simon Calder says people really need to plan their journeys carefully.
So let's start at London Paddington, because we know that all the trains are going to stop as from late tonight. There won't be any until the 28th of December. We are seeing train cancellations to Bristol, to Cardiff, and coming back in the opposite direction due to shortage of train crew. The north of England is going to be even worse. Northern Trains has said, do not travel on some of our key routes. We won't have any trains. We can't get the staff to run them.
Police have arrested a man on suspicion of theft after the removal of a Banksy in south-east London. The piece, a stop sign covered with 3 aircrafts that looked like military drones, was discovered at an intersection in Peckham yesterday. Less than an hour after the artist confirmed the installation was genuine, witnesses saw it being removed by a man with bolt cutters. The Met Police say they have since arrested a man who remains in custody. The father of a 4-year-old boy who was stabbed in East London has paid tribute to his son. Kobe Makaria Dooley was found with knife injuries at a home in Hackney on Wednesday and later died in hospital. His dad says he'll be dearly missed and that the joy and laughter he brought to the world was taken too soon. His mother, Keziah Makaria, has been charged with his murder and is due to appear in court on Thursday. Bells rang out across the Czech Republic and flags are flying at half-mast as the nation holds a day of mourning for the victims of a mass shooting. A service was held at St. Vitus Cathedral at the Prague Castle ahead of a minute of silence at Charles University, where a gunman killed 14 people. The country's president, along with members of the public, have been lighting candles and paying their respects at a memorial. Police are still working to establish a motive for the attack. History has been made, with Rebecca Welch becoming the first woman to referee a Premier League match. The 40-year-old took charge of this afternoon's Fulham-Burnley game. She began refereeing in 2010 and in January became the first female to officiate a men's championship match. Burnley won the game 2-0. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News.
Welcome to the Saturday Night Showdown. So the other day there was a striking headline in the Metro, Britain's most circulated free-sheet tabloid newspaper. Singer arrested over vile remarks made on GB News. Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? And reading the article, I soon realised this was an interview that took place on my show, Free Speech Nation. Hang on, I thought to myself, vile remarks. I don't remember that. It doesn't really fit with the tone of my show. And if a guest were to have made vile remarks, I would have surely challenged them on it. Well, this was an interview with singer Louise Distress, who has faced cancellation in the music industry because she had the temerity to express her opinions. So let's hear what she had to say. Prepare yourself, this is going to be vile.
Talking about my music and talking about my own life meant being able to talk about being a woman. And nowadays, everyone's asking, well, what is a woman? And everything in my life starts with me being a woman, and being a woman's an adult human female, right? So I stated this radical biological fact in an interview in May this year, and since then, the music industry's just shut its doors on me.
Well, there must be some mistake because there were no vile remarks there. And I rewatched the whole interview just to check that I hadn't temporarily slipped into another dimension and missed the bit where Louise started spouting hate and vitriol. But no, there was nothing that any honest person could possibly classify as vile stated during the whole course of that interview. So, what is the Metro playing at? Why make a palpably false claim in the headline? Now, I'm not going to comment on Louise's arrest by police because I don't know the full details. But I am interested in the way that her perfectly reasonable views are being misrepresented in the media, and why the Metro, in particular, has used this as an opportunity to bash GB News. Even its own article doesn't quote any so-called vile remarks. It just makes this bold and inaccurate assertion in the headline. And this is meant to be a news story, remember, not an opinion piece. Now, my feeling is that it was probably the sub-editors doing, because journalists rarely write the headlines themselves. But of course, it does reveal something about the editorial bias of the publication and how it has been so ideologically captured. By way of example, let's take a look at this opinion piece by Cameron Clark, head of platforms, social and communities at Metro, from April of this year. The article shamelessly smears Graham Linehan and J.K. Rowling, misrepresenting their views in a way that makes it clear that Clark hasn't taken the time to read what they've actually said. Clark states that Linehan and Rowling are allied with, quote, anti-trans groups, which is an outright lie, and describes their views as extreme, claiming they've both been radicalised. What are these extreme views? Well, they're pretty much in line with the views of Louise Distress, that there are two sexes, that the recognition of biological sex is important to maintain the rights of women and gay people, and that gay and autistic and gender non-conforming children shouldn't be medicalised and put on a pathway to surgical correction. These are the views that the overwhelming majority of people hold. So really, who has been radicalised here? Graham Linehan and J.K. Rowling, who are expressing the views held by most people in the country and who maintain a decent liberal stance on human rights, or self-proclaimed progressive activists who believe that women don't deserve single-sex spaces and that gay people should be shamed for their sexual orientation? I think we can all see what's going on here. If you want to know what true radicalisation looks like, look no further than the opinion columns of the Metro. So I'm joined tonight by three brilliant comedians, Cressida Wetton, Steve N. Allen and Jonathan Cogan. Cressida, I want to come to you first. What do you make of all this? So Louise Distress appears on my show. She makes some very standard comments, nothing controversial about what she was saying. She's subsequently arrested for circumstances we can't speculate about. But the Metro says she made these vile remarks. But not only that, they put it in the headline. So they made it look like they wanted to make out that GB News was basically full of people making vile statements.
It's GB News shaming, isn't it?
Of course it is,
I think you're exactly right when you said they're opinion pieces rather than journalism.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess the Metro's been captured, hasn't it?
But also shaming Louise Distress for those views, you know, by
Yes.
putting out this message and trying to, you know...
Well, that's it, isn't it? And I mean, I don't think Louise is vile at all, neither were her remarks. I think it's totally unfair. And it's so sabotaging, isn't it? Because people will read the headline and not necessarily go and watch the whole interview.
Yeah, it's very
desperately
annoying.
Unfair.
Yeah, unfair is the word. Steve, what do you make of this? Because, you know, I don't know if you're a Metro reader. I mean, it's free.
That's true.
You know, a lot of people read it just because it's free and it's at the station.
Yeah.
And even when they open it and realise that the quality is quite low, they just sort of... It gives you something to do, doesn't it? But why be so dishonest? Why not just say... You know, person expresses views that we at the Metro don't agree with.
Well, firstly, that's not pithy enough, but that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
The new version of they've expressed a view that we don't agree with is vile, hatred, they should never be allowed to speak again. And that's everywhere. So we can't just blame the Metro for it either. Everyone's form of debate is to say, oh, this thing I disagree with is abhorrent and shouldn't be allowed to be said.
So, and it's also the clickbait thing.
Yeah, oh, yes. Yeah. And I suppose there's another question there which I can't get my head around. Why now? Because if the Metro wanted to call those comments vile, you could do 15 stories a day from what GBNews says. You can normally set your clock by someone saying, well, biological sex. Well, oh, it's been another show.
Yeah,
so
quite.
why pick
but
on...
maybe,
on
Steve, we
yourself?
have to keep saying that scientific fact because so many media outlets seem to ignore that scientific fact or deny it.
But it's interesting that they just find that interview is the one that they call vile. I don't know why, and that one I really can't get my head around. I think I can understand the method of debate now is about cancellation, but I can't understand why... Surely that's been said so many times, but for some reason they found it worse when it was your
Louise
guest
might be a
saying
bit of a target, mightn't
And
she? 'Cause
Louise
this
is
an
probably a
ongoing
target.
You're a target as well, though, are you?
What, me?
Well, I mean-
Yeah.
Well, you think they're going after me as well?
No, I'm surprised they're not.
right.
I feel
Okay,
that they
thanks for that,
should.
Steve.
I
Absolutely.
keep writing to them.
Andrew's been kicked out of the music industry for good. I don't think his solo records are
Oh,
ever going to be
unbelievable.
released.
And, you know, my synth pop is legendary.
Your Peruvian throat singing is
Quite astonishing what I can do.
throat goat. No, I can't. do
Yeah,
that.
and I can beatbox. I can do it right now if you want.
Yeah, go on.
No,
I mean, I don't know. I better not.
Save it for the break.
It's not very festive.
Post Watershed.
What do you make of this story?
Well, I think the Metro is a pretend newspaper. I often like. Apparently, the quality of the writing is deliberately terrible. So you look at the adverts.
Is that right?
I've heard that. My friend Greg
Wow.
told me that in year 8, and I've believed it ever since.
Well, I think that's probably true.
Yeah, the articles are so bad, you just look at the horrible adverts. And the system works. Look, it's still going.
Yes.
And, you know...
OK, I want to ask you all about this idea, though, in Cameron Clark's opinion piece for the Metro. And I know this guy, he wrote it back in April, so it's not... I'm using this as an example. But he says that J.K. Rowling has been radicalised online.
Classic projection.
No, that is, I think projection's what's going
So
on here,
funny.
because who has really been radicalised here?
Yeah, well, the guy who's throwing radicalisation around. But,
Right.
but, you know, for a view that was held by, I'd suggest, most of the country for, you know, since popular culture existed.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's only really over the last 10 years had this kind of pricked the mainstream consciousness, and saying that to hold a view that was, you know, the default for many years is radicalised. It's crazy.
Why go to this, Cressida? Why not just say, again, why not just say, I disagree with this point of view? Why do you have to say this person's been radicalised into believing this view?
Because if you have a proper debate about this, there's a chance that you might be wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't think these people want any kind of opportunities. They want
Sounds pretty radical to me, Cressida.
Yeah, you've been radicalised
that's it, isn't
online.
it? I am
Is it, Steve, also a technique by which you can kind of affiliate the likes of Graham Linehan and J.K. Rowling with the far right? Because when we think of radicalisation, we typically think of the far right, don't we? Or extreme Islamism or something of that kind. And we don't... I mean, if we were being honest, we don't normally think of just feminists who want their own spaces.
No, and yeah, it's actually a really good technique, isn't it? Because it works. If you have words that carry some negative weight with them and associate them with the people you're disagreeing with, you don't have to argue the point, you argue the person, and from your point of view, come across as winning.
That's so low. From what you're describing, it sounds like that's a self-conscious decision on the part of this opinion columnist. Do you think maybe he genuinely believes it? Do you think maybe he genuinely thinks that scientific fact is hate? Is it possible that he actually does think that?
But, I don't think it would be possible for him to have that sentence representing the thought that he has. But I'm sure there's an emotional response to his perception of what those words are doing.
Yes.
I'm going to get a bit wordy flim-flam there. It gets too difficult to understand. But no, I don't think those words in that order that he believes. But he thinks there's a bad thing happening and therefore justifies all of the words he uses to describe that.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe, you know, I'd like to take people at their word. I like to think he's being honest. You don't think he's being honest?
No, it's horrible. It's like when there's a school bully and you think, I don't want them to get me, so you act out against the weak kids or something. I just don't buy it.
You've just done the same thing. It's horrible because you don't like it. Maybe it's not a conscious... You're saying it's a conscious decision because he's trying to keep his head down below the parapet, and therefore... we know you don't agree with his point of view.
He's not thinking it through. He's just sort of acting out of fear, like, oh, I'm on the good side, I'm on the good side.
You're dismissing that maybe he believes it without necessarily thinking around all the corners of the argument.
Does anyone believe it? Have they not just... haven't thought it through?
I think there are some people who do believe that we all have a kind of gendered soul, and that it doesn't necessarily match our body. And, you know, we can say that's ridiculous if we like, but there are people who believe that...
Do you think it's disproportionately high of people who write articles and blogs?
I think that those kind of people are attracted to that kind of job.
OK.
Because there does seem to be a correlation between that belief and extreme narcissism.
Yes.
You know,
OK.
again, I'm doing the thing I'm not meant to do. But I'm doing it self-consciously. I'm being quite meta. Yeah, so
You're
I'm
self-consciously being
embodying
not self-conscious
the thing
there.
that I'm criticising.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, you know?
It's like art.
I mean, I like to think that everything I do is art.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
You showed me some interesting art earlier on.
I did.
Yeah. What's the guy called again?
Tom of Finland.
Tom of Finland. Look him up.
No, don't,
Google him.
Don't do that, kids.
Save search off.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. OK, now then, we do have 3 amazing prizes that are guaranteed to be won by one of our lucky viewers in our Great British giveaway. £10,000 cash, tech and vouchers. And if you haven't entered yet, why on earth not? What are you thinking? It is so easy. Here are all the details.
This is your chance to win cash, treats and tech in our very first Great British giveaway. There's a totally tax-free £10,000 cash up for grabs. Cash which would help make 2024 a whole lot better. We're also going to send you shopping with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. What would be on your shopping list? If it's a new iPhone, we've also got that covered too, with the latest iPhone 15 Pro Max, which you'll also receive. For another chance to win the iPhone, the vouchers and £10,000 cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB01, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 5th of January. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Next on the show, we're going to be looking at some big names from the week's news and determine whether they are cursed or blessed. This week, we're going to be putting Donald Trump, Banksy and some guy called Santa Claus under the microscope. Don't go away.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Regular host Leo Kearse may be off, but we can still look at some big figures from the week and decide who is cursed or blessed. So who deserves to spend their Christmas enjoying fine food, wonderful companionship, and maybe a tipple or two, and who deserves some Lewis Schaefer merchandise? So let's start with former President Donald Trump. Trump hopes to be the president of the future, but that plan was dealt a blow this week when Colorado's top court ruled that he cannot appear on the state's ballot as a Republican presidential candidate. The Colorado court said it had found clear evidence that President Trump engaged in insurrection with regard to the Capitol riots of 2021 when Trump supporters attacked the government building in Washington. The Colorado ruling is likely to end up in the Supreme Court, adding further spice to an already charged election. Cressida, Donald Trump, cursed or blessed?
Well, he's both, isn't he, in extremes. There's people who absolutely will become more and more devoted to him, and there's people who think he's vile, whatever he does.
Yeah, but he does, his whole shtick is that he is basically a martyr. There's the deep state is against him, and then Colorado trying to prevent him from running kind of feeds into that narrative.
Perfectly. He's going to end up blessed, isn't he? That's what's going to happen.
His approval rating's already soaring.
Right.
For this,
and I don't understand. I don't understand how anybody could have thought this would go any differently.
Yeah, no, Steve, you're not a Trump fan. True. I think it's fair to say.
The man and the concept.
Yes. OK, so what do you make of it? Because it is true, like, that when they went for the impeachment, for instance, his popularity soared. When they raided Mar-a-Lago, his popularity soared. Any time they do something like this, it does kind of give him a leg up. Isn't it just... Don't they learn their lesson?
No, it's amazing that they don't. Although I think, as we talked about in the earlier topic, that if you drink that Kool-Aid, you believe that actually whatever you do, however you stop Trump, it's worthwhile. So that's why they have this 35 court cases against him, whatever.
Yes.
Without actually doing the analysis of realising maybe there's 2 court cases that matter on the run-up to an election. And Chris Christie, who's also running and also a Republican, but makes the really good point. You need Donald Trump to lose an election, not lose a court case.
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to make any difference. I mean, even if he loses an election, he might pretend he hasn't. But if he gets stopped by a court case, then, of course, he can have the narrative that he would have won if it weren't for the unfair ruling.
So, Jonathan, I mean, this is an interesting one because a lot of Trump haters, I think that's the word the kids use, they have come out and said, we don't want this to happen. Like, this is not popular on either side. Partly because it's just clearly unconstitutional. It's clearly not going to work, right? And most people know that already. It's not going to... The Supreme Court, which is mostly Republican nominees, by the way, they're never going to pass this. What are they thinking?
Of course, I mean, and it does, like you say, it fits the narrative. It's almost as if it's purposely done to boost him as much as possible. Is it some really clever 4D chess? Because every time something like this happens, it feeds into the martyr narrative, and he just gets a bit more, ammo, like, oh, they're coming for me, better vote me in, like,
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Is Trump derangement syndrome a thing? What do you guys think?
We've got Sam Harris down the line. I like Sam. I was listening to him today.
I know, he's great. But you know... Well, I mean, people do hate him to extraordinary degrees, don't they?
They really do. I think he sort of embodies everything a lot of people hate, whether or not he actually does, or they're just projecting that onto him.
What do you think, Steve?
Well, I was going to say, just to give the pushback, which means I can have an enjoyable evening of hatred on Twitter.
Yes.
That legally, if they have it in the Constitution that there is a rule, they have to uphold the rule, otherwise the rule disappears.
Yes.
Their court system's based on precedent. So you could forevermore have an insurrectionist stand as a candidate for the president.
That's true. That's true.
The phrasing of it, the reason why there's some legal issue there is that in that Amendment 14, Section 3 or whatever it is, they say anyone who has given comfort to our enemies. So it's not necessarily about having to hold a pitchfork yourself. If you have supported insurrectionists, then you are seemed to be no longer valid to stand for their primary. They've not looked at it in terms of...
The problem with that, Steve, is that no serious legal scholar has suggested that what he said amounted to incitement, and therefore he can't be accused of that.
Yeah, because he's not legally been found guilty of being linked to the insurrection. So actually...
I mean, he wasn't there.
Yeah, well...
He actually told people to go home.
Yeah. you don't have to be there to give comfort to. That's the unfortunate phrasing. When they
But what's
phrased
the
it
argument,
originally...
though? I mean, I'm interested. What is the argument that he gave comfort to them? Because I've read all the things he said and I couldn't see any evidence of it.
Well, I can't think of the quotes that they use right now. I'm just saying that's why it's an issue that needs to be looked into.
Yes.
And even I agree. When you actually do read through the quotes of things he said that might have whipped up or fomented, it's no smoking gun. It's no, what you should do is head down there and smash that up. I agree with that. So actually, what they need to do is get the ducks in the right order, legally work out whether he's in any way linked to insurrection, and if he is, then have a think about whether that means you trigger Amendment 14.
Can't America just do better than no, seriously. Trump versus Biden. I mean, come on. Biden can barely speak, and Trump's going to run for president from a prison cell. I mean, come on.
The system works.
I think with both sides, if they get somebody else, then that somebody else will win, won't they? Because neither of them are actually popular, you know, en masse, like with everybody.
Just get a sensible politician on one side.
They could rejoin as well. If they paid the back tax that they owed us, I think we could accept them back.
Or abolish all governments.
Abolish all governments. Go for an anarchist state. I like
Jonathan.
it. Good one, Jonathan. Cressida, what did you say? Cursed or blessed? Both.
I think blessed.
Oh, blessed. OK, there we go. Next up, we've got the mysterious artist Banksy, who has seen his latest creation taken down within hours of it being verified as his own piece. So apparently the piece is an anti-war statement which appeared on a street in South London. However, half an hour after he'd verified on social media that it was one of his works, the piece was taken down. You can see the piece there in the image. It was taken down by bolt cutters, and now the police are they're saying that they're waiting to see if anyone reports a crime. Isn't it just a form of art criticism to take down what is quite objectionably bad art?
Can we start doing that in galleries? Because I might make Tracy Emin's Unmade Bed. I could.
Well, it's been burnt. It was destroyed, wasn't it?
That's good criticism, burning that, but I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, what I really love is the idea of some kid on Christmas morning unwrapping a giant stop sign and having no idea why he's been given that for Christmas.
Yeah, well, it would be quite a valuable gift.
That's true. Also, because was it put up illegally? Does that mean you can steal it?
Well, sort of everything that Banksy does is slightly dodgy around the law, isn't it? Because it's either graffiti or...
Yeah, so if you do take it, is that fine? What's the rules?
Well, I don't know.
Litter picking, as far as you're concerned.
Litter picking, exactly.
I mean,
How rude.
Is it situationist art, I suppose? It's kind of like...
Yeah, the whole thing's performative, isn't it? Of course it got nicked. It's like, isn't that all part of it?
Yeah, maybe he wanted
There's
it to be
no
nicked.
Banksy work that isn't going to get nicked now.
The thing is, we don't know who he is, right? Is that right? We still don't know who he is. Who do we... Do you know who he is?
I'm from Bristol, and there's loads of people that think they do know who it is, mind.
OK.
I personally don't know him.
I think it's Giles Brandreth. Anyway,
you could reach up there.
Steve.
So there was earlier in the year there was one that was painted on a wall in Dover and that was whipped down within a day.
Yes.
But that is graffiti painting on a wall. I think there's probably a better argument. I can't work this out. I've tried to look at all the videos, read all the stories about it. I don't know if where he put the stop sign is in terms of the highway code required to be a place of stopping. Because if not, you've got to take it down. Is it a normal stop sign?
So maybe they were just doing a public service. Steve, do you like his art?
I'm in general not moved by any art. Most of the time. There's no science involved in it. So, but no, I do think now we've got to the stage of it's even less to do with art than it was in the first place.
Well, he's no Beryl Cook, is he? Cressida.
No, but I mean, I've got.
He's no Tom from
for him.
Finland.
Years ago, I went to one of his exhibitions, and it was full of interesting stuff and sculptures and.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's not interesting conceptually. I just think
he's the coolest guy in sixth form, and that's about the end of it.
So is he cursed or blessed? What, do we have to make a decision? I don't know the rules here.
I think 1 hour has got stolen. I would say that's cursed.
Cursed.
Yep.
You're going with cursed. OK, very, very good. OK, so next up, he's always in the headlines this time of year. Father Christmas, otherwise known as Santa Claus. What kind of person has a pseudonym like that? That makes me very mistrustful. And while other pop culture characters come and go from the imagination, this guy just keeps trucking along. You don't hear about him from January to November, but come December and it's Santa this, Santa that. We were lucky enough to have him on with us on GB News this morning. Jonathan.
Yes.
Santa Claus, cursed or blessed?
I think he's blessed. He's, immortal. He can travel at speeds nearing the speed of light, and he's incredibly generous. I think he's blessed. But at the same time, he has to do a lot of work, so there's a bit of... But I feel like it's not a burden to him. He enjoys it.
Difficult, though, isn't it? Because in Latin America, the tradition is that the baby Jesus helps Santa deliver the gifts, which is a form of child labour. Child labour. So that's what we're talking about here. That's the kind of character this guy is. What do you think, Steve?
I'd say technically blessed because of his other name, St. Nick.
Yeah.
So if you're a saint, you've been blessed. I think I've just worked the system. Sorry.
Interesting. Is it true that Father Christmas was popularised by Coca-Cola? Like the way in which we think of him now? The red outfit, the obesity, that this was sort of invented by Coca-Cola. That's what they do, they generate obesity.
I've heard there's also some, not even being silly here, some like native tribal traditions of a kind of shaman coming down I want to say like a teepee thing in red and giving presents. That's apparently also part of the legend.
Yeah, you are being silly.
No, that's part of the history.
Making stuff up now.
He's a very worldly man,
it's
isn't he? I mean, he would
as well.
take influence from everybody all over the world.
I suppose he would. I mean, you know, we always worry about the breaking and entering aspect. And also the fact that, you know, what would happen, you know, what happens if Santa Claus comes down the chimney and, you know, one of the parents wakes up, sees an intruder, doesn't know who it is, and they've got their baseball bat, or they start making out.
Yeah, I saw Mummy kissing Santa Claus.
Now, what's that from? Is it a song?
My troubled childhood years.
So, yeah, and also he tends to be a hypersexualised figure these days. You know,
Yes, when Mariah Carey gets hold of him.
Mariah Carey, if you've seen the video of Mariah Carey rolling in the snow with Santa Claus, Eartha Kitt singing Santa Baby, and there's an X-rated version of that. I'm not going to talk to you about that one. But
I saw him in the Westgate shopping centre in Stevenage, and he wasn't looking too sexy then. So you have to pay 15 quid to visit him as well.
Yes.
Oh,
do you think? I mean, it's good though to have you call him a plus-sized role model. You know, if we're going down the road of body positivity, he's a great role model because he's sort of saying he's not going to diet.
He's been doing that a long time, hasn't he? He's been into that way before it was cool.
Yeah,
so.
But it's a bit like the joke about Superman pretending that he falls out of a window and gets someone to follow him because obviously he doesn't die. This guy's immortal and has a BMI that's about 45.
Yes.
What, getting other people to eat the same way and then all of a sudden they die early?
Yeah, no, it's very dodgy. And of course, the treatment of the reindeers, I think, is kind of. I think they like it. You think it's okay?
Yeah, I think they're into it, yeah. They're all happy and singing and...
Which is the one with the red nose? Rudolph?
Jimmy?
No, it's Rudolph, and there were some bullying issues, but I think in this day and age...
Did he join in the games?
It's not bullying, it's alcoholism.
Out.
That's all it is. OK, look, coming up next on the Saturday Night Showdown, Wham! Have finally made it to #1 in the Christmas charts, only 39 years after the song was originally released. They get there in the end. So we're going to celebrate with a discussion of Christmas music, and my panel are about to reveal their festive favourites. Let us know if you agree, and don't go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. It's time for Culture Corner. But what could be more cultural at this time of year than festive music? So Last Christmas by Wham has been declared this year's Christmas #1, 39 years after it was denied the top spot by Band-Aid. Oh, evil people. Jonathan Cogan has gone even further back for his Christmas pick. So let's have a listen.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow.
OK, Bing Crosby. Jonathan, why did you pick that?
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's just the classic Christmas. It's got that warmth that it generates. It's just a very traditional... But, I mean, the actual song I wanted to do, I wasn't allowed to do because it's a bit rude. So I went
OK,
back
so you went
and
that.
Yeah.
It just strikes me as very sentimental.
It really
for
is,
you.
but
I didn't know you were so sentimental.
I'm a real sentimental
I see you more as a kind
schmuck.
of a black-hearted, you know, kind of...
I have my moments, but it depends who crosses me. But, yeah, at the same time, I also associate it with Home Alone, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But it's like a modern version. Macaulay Culkin's getting ready, just had a shower. I used to base myself on him back in the day.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, let's not get into that now, because we are going to talk about Christmas movies later. Any thoughts on that song, the Bing Crosby song?
Racist. Can't believe you picked that. White Christmas.
White Christmas.
You've been radicalised.
Yeah, you're right.
Been
Bloody radicalised.
Well, yeah.
You're a musician. Have you ever covered it?
Well, he is a musician.
We did do a Christmas EP once. We did a few songs. We did #1s that were #1 at Christmas that weren't Christmas related.
Really?
Was it... I'll remember, but carry on.
Yeah, we'll carry on talking while you do that, because it's not great TV.
No.
I mean, it's quite interesting that Christmas songs, they are sort of perennial. Everyone, they always do well. Cher has just released a Christmas album full of new songs. Well, some of them are covers, but some of them are new. She's 77. I mean, she's still...
Wow.
I won't be doing that when... Well, I won't be alive when I'm 77.
You say a cost of living crisis. I bet she thought she could retire by now.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe that's what it is.
Trying out another album.
Yeah, I know.
Mad World was one of them.
Mad World. Well done, Jonathan.
That's not Christmas.
No,
well, it was a Christmas
#1 at Christmas, yeah.
It's not really very festive.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one about the psychedelic rabbit?
Oh, Donnie Darko.
Yeah, it's from that film.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, well, it was definitely in that film.
Anyway,
originally, but...
let's see what Cressida chose for her best ever Christmas song.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay, for Jesus Christ our Saviour was born on Christmas Day, to save us all from Satan's powers when we were gone astray. Glad tidings of comfort and joy.
Annie Lennox is great, isn't she?
Is that all we're gonna... That's... Oh, my goodness, that's very misleading.
Why?
Because it drops, it starts, and they're all marching through the forest.
It's
and
not choral
cool
the whole way through.
It's like a festival song.
Sorry, the clip we chose maybe didn't reflect... I'm sorry about that.
Well, I would recommend everyone go and look it up. It's very cool.
She's got an amazing voice, isn't it? Jonathan thought she was Enya.
Well,
and she doesn't look at all like
all
Enya.
women look the same to me.
There's not a panpipe in it.
Absolutely. And actually, Enya does brilliant Christmas songs, and she hasn't done an album for 8 years. Lazy.
Oh, get on with it, Enya.
Yeah, for goodness sake.
Pull your Enya out.
I think that's an interesting one that Annie Lennox has done, though. I like this idea of covering old Christmas songs and giving it a new flavour. I think that's the way to go, isn't it? But I think that's...
I don't know. There's no sexy Santas in that, though, is there?
No, well, there might be, because we didn't see the rest of the video.
True. Is that what happened?
There could be sexy Santas later on, OK. But let's move on to Steve's choice. What did Steve choose as the best Christmas song of all time?
Humbug, but that's too strong, 'cause it is my favorite holiday. But all this year's been a busy blur, don't think I have the energy to add to my already mad rush, just 'cause it's 'tis the season. The perfect gift for me would be completions and connections left from last year. Ski shop encounter, most interesting, add his number but never the time. Most of 81, pass along those lines, so deck those halls, trim those trees, raise up...
OK, yeah, Steve, look, it's a song that always annoyed me, if I'm honest, but maybe it's because I was more familiar with the Spice Girls version.
Oh,
is that an abomination?
I used to have respect for you, sometimes. But like the Spice Girls version of it is the biggest problem with that song. It didn't need to be recovered. It's one of those that just crops up every year.
Yes.
And my backstory with it is that I used to work more in commercial radio on various little local stations, and that song is brilliant because it's a story song.
Yes.
It's one of those where she is miserable. She doesn't like Christmas through every single verse, and in the last one, a little bit of magic happens. And if you're running late for the news, you have to fade it early, and it's just a miserable song.
Oh,
you
that's
missed the
great.
bit, yeah.
That's like turning off before the last scene of Old Yeller, just so you avoid the nasty bit. Yeah, that's what you do. The Waitresses, though, now, they hadn't done other songs. I don't know any of their other songs.
Well, they were in America touring at the time when they recorded that, and it was in, I think it was either August or July. They were in one of the states that has a desert, and the recording studio where they recorded it was in a desert.
Right.
So they were baking during that, and I just love the idea of them writing that song and recording, trying to sound all festive.
Yes.
In the middle of the desert.
That is great. That is good. That's given me a whole newfound respect for it. Do you like that one, Cressida?
It reminds me of panic buying dresses for Christmas dues in December.
Me too.
Yeah. And Jonathan?
Honestly, never heard the song before.
You've never heard that song
I don't think I've ever heard that, yeah.
That is actually quite remarkable.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can go through life without hearing, because it's always sort of there.
I never learned to do my shoelaces properly.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, blimey.
There's the wiping coming along.
Let's not get into that. All right, finally, this is the thing that I chose. Let's have a look at this one. Now, the reason I chose that is I think there aren't enough Christmas pop songs that are in Latin. That is my view on that.
Was it?
Oh, yeah, it's Gaudete. It means rejoice ye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's an old medieval Christmas song.
Yeah, it sounds like medieval monks, but with Fatboy Slim involved.
Yeah, well, it's Erasure. It's Erasure doing it, you know. So I think synth pop and Latin, we haven't had enough of that fusion.
I think, if anything, you can blame the Romans.
Yes.
They did a lot of things, but they really didn't nail the synth pop.
They did. They really didn't.
It's a problem right there.
Yeah, it is a problem. Do you like that sort of blend?
That was quite a curious mix. It was quite a terrifying music video as well. Quite Dr. Caligari's Cabinet of Caligari. Or
they've gone dark with that, which I thought was quite interesting.
Again, not heard that one either, but okay.
You've not heard that one either?
Maybe it's because I'm Jewish. I wasn't allowed to listen to Christmas music.
Maybe, and that's very much a Christian kind of music, Latin thing.
I've got some Hanukkah bangers there.
Have you?
Yeah.
You should have brought them with you. OK, well, look, those are our Christmas songs.
That's a good rate for the loan. That's my Christmas song.
What? I didn't even hear that.
Move straight on. Or apologise for it. It's one of those.
I'm going to just apologise just in case. Just on a matter of taste. I don't know what he was doing there. Anyway, up next, we're going to be discussing the AVIVA boss, who hit the headlines earlier this month for saying that any senior white hires had to be run past her first. See you shortly.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to this Saturday Night Showdown with me, Andrew Doyle. So Amanda Blanc, the chief executive of insurance company AVIVA, has been in the news of late. She's revealed that no white males can be recruited to senior posts without her say-so under new diversity, equity and inclusion guidance. Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert is director of campaign group Don't Divide Us. She has written about this and joins me now. Alka, welcome to the show. Do you want to give us your initial thoughts on this? When you first heard about this policy, what did you make of it?
I was horrified. I was really quite horrified. Recently, we've seen on our streets the kind of logic of this kind of identity politics played out in terms of decolonisation. And I think in the hands of a chief executive like Amanda Blanc, we see what this same ideology, how this plays out in the workforce. Which is, I mean, she's saying you don't need to read between any lines. She's very explicit. It's not you're a problem because of if you say anything wrong or if you speak incorrectly or you're rude. You are a problem if you are white and if you are male. You're such, your very existence is such that you merit another kind of hoop to jump through. I can't see how that's not discrimination. I can't see how that doesn't go against the Equality Act.
Presumably, Amanda Blanc or people who agree with this kind of approach would argue that they are effectively providing a remedy for past discrimination. As Ibram X. Kendi writes, the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. What do you make of that idea?
It's nonsensical. The past discrimination is past. If you want to look at current discrimination, that's a different thing altogether. Let's look at it. Let's see the evidence. Let's have some proper scrutiny for any where there is discrimination. And if there is discrimination in a workplace, in a company like AVIVA, which, to be honest, I would start off from a fairly sceptical position because, our society has moved on. There are now HR practices in every major company that would make make it difficult to discriminate. I'm not saying it's impossible, but fine. I'm not saying don't do anything about it, but you do something. How is Amanda Blanc having a final say-so on applicants who are male and white going to help anybody facing discrimination in the workplace? It's a non sequitur. This is not about that. It's about imposing a new set of beliefs, really.
I mean, there are some activists who would say that the idea of a meritocracy is in itself a racist idea. What kind of message do you think that sends to people of colour?
Well, look, meritocracy on a social level, is limited, right? Depends on major macro level economics and a whole host of things. But meritocracy within an individual institution or an individual organisation is possible, is much more possible than, in society at large. And so if this idea that, you need the protection of EDI beliefs and everybody acting according to EDI policies to get on if you're not white, is frankly patronising. It's patronising for non-white people. And it's also authoritarian for all of us, really. I mean, it's really what it's saying is that, if you disagree, shut up, because if you speak out, against this, this is good, no question, no criticism allowed. So if you're not for this, then you can only be not good.
But Alka,
it's a horrible trap.
Do you accept, though, that a lot of these kinds of policies are well-intentioned, that they're coming from a good place?
Andrew, maybe a year ago I would have said yes. And I'm not saying everybody that supports this is conspiratorial or is conniving or, sort of bad intentioned. But it is becoming clearer and clearer as time goes on. We see so many people, this isn't just, my political belief versus theirs. This is a whole swathe of ordinary employees that don't necessarily get onto the news or the media, who are actually being discriminated against and facing quite horrible practices in their workplaces every day because they fall foul of this, undemocratically imposed new ideology and set of beliefs. So I'm finding it more and more difficult to give good faith to that to that argument. I would have done, like I said, I would have done a year ago. I'm less inclined to that now.
But a lot of the activists will say, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I think it's important, that a lot of the people who implement these ideas would say, well, you, Alka, you've said on my show before, you have experienced racism yourself. And that all these people are saying is that they're trying to address racism. It's just that their belief is that racism is something that is deeply embedded and structural. And therefore, the only way you can address it is with DEI policies.
Well, I think you need to look very carefully at and we need to think a bit harder about what DEI is and what it represents, right? Yes, I have suffered racism in the past, but on an individual level, a philosophical individual level, I have not let that define me. Other people may choose to respond in a different way. That's on that level, it's an individual choice. But if the kind of everyday multicultural ethos and the attempts to combat racism that most of us believe in, that we've had in place for the best part of the post-war period, if they're to work, and they have worked, generally they've been quite successful, we have made progress, then there are important preconditions, and three of those preconditions are that freedom of speech is protected, that none of the public institutions who want to support celebrating different cultures and trying to make non-white people or minorities feel welcome, that none of those bodies enforce it or impose it upon individuals. And the third one is that, they need to be democratically accountable. And you can see, all three of those conditions are really weak today, if they exist at all in some places. Now, in that context, you have to look at, are DEI policies going to help anybody? Who are they helping? They're not helping anybody who is an ordinary worker, black or white or brown, who may be suffering discrimination, and they will find themselves in a workplace. Just think about it. If I was unsure, I think, am I being is that person being racist? Am I being discriminated against? If I were in a workplace, I would find it really difficult to speak out, because as soon as I speak out, I will be put in a box as a victim, and I will kind of lose control over my own narrative, over my own sense of, this is, that's going to happen because all the policies are in place. So there's no space for good faith conversation for people to address problems where they may exist. That's why it's so, it feels such a kind of choking culture when you're in it. And that, I can't see how anything good can come out of that.
Well, Alka Segal-Cuthbert, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the show. Really appreciate it. So I should say that Alka is the director of Don't Divide Us, which is a group that's an anti-racist group in the traditional sense of the word, trying to resolve some of these issues and some of the divisions that are caused by these kind of DEI policies. So check them out at Don't Divide Us Now on Twitter. There's plenty more to come. Still on Saturday Night Showdown, we've discussed our favourite Christmas songs already, and I'm just about to reveal my favourite Christmas movies. And we're going to see if my panel agree with me. This could get quite controversial, so do stick around with us.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Looking towards Christmas, and it's looking like it's staying cloudy and damp for most of us, with temperatures generally above average for the time of year. Low pressure continues to sit out towards the northwest, slowly bringing frontal systems across the UK through the rest of the weekend and in towards the Christmas period. Heavy rain that's been across parts of western Scotland gradually starts to ease, but turns heavier across western parts of Wales. We could see up to 80 millimetres here, and generally quite a cloudy picture for much of England and Wales. Some clearer spells further north, but blustery showers pushing in from the west and feeling a little bit chillier here. However, it'll be much milder further south, with perhaps 11 or 12 degrees. So a very mild, cloudy and damp start for much of England and Wales on Christmas Eve. Rain continues to spread its way eastwards as we head in towards the afternoon. Some sunshine across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland, but plenty of blustery showers around, and some very strong winds across northeast England, perhaps up to 70 miles an hour. Temperatures still above average across the board, perhaps 13 or 14 degrees. To start on Christmas Day, another wet and cloudy picture for much of England and Wales. Heavy rain spreads in from the west, slowly clearing its way eastwards as we go through the day. Further north, there will be some brighter spells, but another band of rain pushes its way northwards into parts of Scotland, perhaps bringing some snow to some high ground. Looking drier and brighter on Boxing Day, but further wet and windy weather on the way.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. Still to come on the Saturday Night Showdown, I'm about to count down my favourite Christmas movies and we'll see if my panel agrees with my picks. The government have unveiled their trans guidance for children this week and we're going to be discussing their plans. And I will ask my panel what they think makes a perfect Christmas. This is your Saturday Night Showdown. So join us in a moment, but first let's get the news headlines from Sophia.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters have been rallying in central London.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
The demonstrators were urging Christmas shoppers to boycott what they say are pro-Israel brands. Traffic on Oxford Street was brought to a standstill as crowds chanted, "Don't fund genocide." Security guards blocked the entrance to fashion shop Zara while dozens of officers followed the march. Police say there were no arrests. Meanwhile, today's been dubbed Super Saturday, tipped to be the busiest in-store shopping day of the year. Last year, shoppers were said to have spent over £1.5 million buying last-minute Christmas gifts. The Great Christmas Getaway is well and truly underway. The AA says it's the busiest day of the pre-Christmas period with an expected 16.5 million extra cars on the road. Travellers have been facing delays by road and rail, with train passengers dealing with cancellations. More disruption is expected tomorrow as London's King's Cross and Paddington stations close for engineering works. Travel expert Simon Calder says people really need to plan their journeys carefully.
So let's start at London Paddington, because we know that all the trains are going to stop as from late tonight. There won't be any until the 28th of December. We are seeing train cancellations to Bristol, to Cardiff, and coming back in the opposite direction due to shortage of train crew. The north of England is going to be even worse. Northern Trains has said, do not travel on some of our key routes. We won't have any trains. We can't get the staff to run them.
Police have arrested a man on suspicion of theft after the removal of a Banksy in south-east London. The piece, a stop sign covered with 3 aircrafts that looked like military drones, was discovered at an intersection in Peckham yesterday. Less than an hour after the artist confirmed the installation was genuine, witnesses saw it being removed by a man with bolt cutters. The Met Police say they have since arrested a man who remains in custody. And history has been made with Rebecca Welch becoming the first woman to referee a Premier League match. The 40-year-old took charge of this afternoon's Fulham-Burnley game. She began refereeing in 2010 and in January became the first female to officiate a men's championship match. Burnley won the game 2-0. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown with me, Andrew Doyle. So, over the Christmas period, we'll all have plenty of time to watch TV as a means to avoid conversation with the family. But what to watch? Well, I thought I'd give you some suggestions by compiling my top 10 favourite Christmas movies of all time. Now, I should warn you, my definition of a Christmas movie might differ from yours. As far as I'm concerned, any film that is set at Christmas qualifies as a Christmas film, even if it's not actually about Christmas. So, with that caveat out of the way, let's start. So, You've Got Mail was the first DVD I ever bought. DVD, that's how old and primitive I am. And I really love You've Got Mail, although it's often unfairly dismissed as a poor man's Sleeping in Seattle. I think it's actually better than Sleeping in Seattle. You know, I think the script is stronger. I think the chemistry between Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan is sparkier. And given that most relationships now begin online, usually between avatars who in no way resemble their owners, this film does feel prescient. So, at number 9, we have this, Eyes Wide Shut. So, what better way to celebrate the festive season than with this creepy, erotic psychodrama? It was the last film by Stanley Kubrick and starred Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman in a dysfunctional marriage. I wonder how they managed to pull that off. It includes scenes of infidelity, depraved orgies with masked strangers, and scenes of psychological intimidation. So fun for all the family. And next up, we have Die Hard. This usually tops people's favourite Christmas films of all time. Late 80s action films tend to be the best because this was just before CGI kicked in and everything started looking vaguely like a cartoon. It means the action sequences feel authentic, there's a sense of jeopardy, and Bruce Willis is obviously brilliant, and Alan Rickman is rather wonderful as the villain as well. So let's move on to the next one. This is Rocky IV. Now, if some of you are getting annoyed that I keep choosing films that are set at Christmas but aren't really about Christmas, this one will really bother you because there's nothing remotely Christmassy about Rocky other than the fact that he sounds a bit drunk. But the final fight between Rocky and Dolph Lundgren takes place in the Soviet Union on Christmas Day. You see, so there's lots of opportunities for extended montages of training in the snow, great stuff like that. Very festive, I think. And this one is another film directed and co-written by Nora Ephron, who was also responsible for You've Got Mail. This is Mixed Nuts, and it might not be the best of her films, but it's got an incredible cast. And I think Steve Martin is a genius. This film has one of the last performances ever by Madeline Kahn, who is, to my mind, one of the best comedic actors who ever lived. So it's worth watching just for her. Moving on to Batman Returns. So there's a really memorable fight scene in Batman Returns where Michelle Pfeiffer, as the Catwoman, licks Batman's face under the mistletoe. Now, I'm not a big fan of Tim Burton, by the way, but this is one of his best. And unlike the ponderous Batman films by Christopher Nolan, it really doesn't take itself too seriously. Let's not forget that, really, it's all about a grown man jumping around in a stupid cape. It's not Citizen Kane. Let's move on to this film now. This is a wonderful Christmas film called The Long Kiss Goodnight. Now, whenever I hear about how groundbreaking it is to see films like Captain Marvel with a female action hero, I just think about all those female action stars of the past who are being completely overlooked. Sigourney Weaver, Linda Hamilton, Pam Grier, Uma Thurman, Kathleen Turner. I mean, there have been so many. It's just that we didn't used to obsess over identity politics so much, so we didn't really notice. Now, Geena Davis in The Long Kiss Goodnight he's one of the best action movie heroes of either sex, and it's set at Christmas as well, and it's got Samuel L. Jackson in a supporting role, so what's not to like? Next up, we've got this film, Trading Places. Now, I think Eddie Murphy is right up there with Madeline Kahn as one of the very best comedic actors of all time. And before coming to America, he collaborated with director John Landis on this film about two corrupt businessmen who have a bet to see if they can reverse the fortunes of a homeless man, played by Eddie Murphy, and one of their affluent corporate employees, played by Dan Aykroyd. And it's a brilliant concept, it's a witty script, and it's very, very funny. And this one you've all seen, surely Scrooged. Scrooge is probably the first on this list that is actually indisputably a Christmas film. It's based on A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Can't get much more Christmassy than that. And it's Bill Murray at his best. And it's got a really standout performance by Carol Kane as the ghost of Christmas Present. It's dark, it's consistently funny. The ending is cheesy as hell, but, you know, it's Christmas, so we can forgive a touch of mawkishness. And I think the best Christmas film of all time is obviously Gremlins. It's obvious. It's a satire of the kind of schmaltzy, sentimental films we like to watch at Christmas. It's silly and violent, and it's a lot of fun. And I think the Gremlins themselves are a fitting metaphor for social justice activists, because they started off all cute and cuddly, and then they turned into ravenous monsters with an unappeasable bloodlust. So if you haven't seen Gremlins, please do try that out on Christmas Day, maybe just after the King's speech. And those are my top 10. Let's see what my panel think. I'm here with the brilliant comedians Cressida Wetton, Steve N. Allen and Jonathan Cogan. Cressida, do you like those picks? Do you think I'm right?
Lots of them look amazing. Quite a lot of violence in there, I noticed.
That's the leitmotif of those films. Are you suggesting that's something about my psychology?
I think it might be. I wouldn't associate boxing with Christmas, but you did explain that. I want to see the nuts one.
Mixed Nuts.
Mixed Nuts.
It's very, very good.
It's great.
It's great. It's great. But what I mean, like, I think I was making a serious point about The Long Kiss Goodnight, in that, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's one of the most. I watched it again recently, and it is a really brilliant, stupid action film that really doesn't take itself seriously.
A secret trained assassin and doesn't know.
Yes, she's a mother. She's like part of the PTA, and she dresses up as Santa and bakes cookies for the kids.
And she was jumping on a carrot with super speed.
Yeah, but she was an assassin,
right?
Who knocked her head and then forgot that she was an assassin. Okay. So in the film, she suddenly realises that she can. She's got an incredible fighting and gun skills.
I actually watched 20 minutes of this at a Cambodian bus station when I was travelling on 19, and it's the first time I'd ever taken, and only time I'd ever taken Xanax. And I just remember being extremely confused because the sound wasn't on. Yeah. So I was just watching her chop up a carrot. I was like, "What's going on? This is the weirdest cooking show I've ever seen." But now you know.
It's really worth watching. It is very violent.
Okay.
I will say.
Like all Christmas films.
But
It's basically The Bourne Identity, but before The Bourne Identity.
It might well be, yes. Although wasn't The Bourne Identity based on a novel which probably predates The Long Kiss Goodnight?
So now we know who nicked the idea first.
Well, I'm not suggesting plagiarism by any means. But let's get down to brass tacks here. Is it controversial for me to suggest that Gremlins is the best Christmas film of all time?
Is it set at Christmas?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, someone dies under a Christmas tree at one point.
OK, well, that's pretty good. I mean, you have missed out It's a Wonderful Life. I mean...
I have missed out It's a Wonderful Life.
Not enough violence? I don't know.
No one... there's no bazookas, no one throws a knife at someone, no one gets crushed under a Christmas tree, no one gets eaten to death by beasts.
But it is effectively an alternate reality film. It's a multiverse film, so Marvel are just getting around to doing it, and It's a Wonderful Life basically did it first.
And also, It's a Wonderful Life, I think it's a bit too obvious, you know, and it's too happy. And I think we have to kind of just accept that Christmas, for a lot of people, is a miserable time of year.
Well, this is why I like Die Hard so much. I'm not sure... Your definition is if it's somewhere in December, it's a Christmas film. It's a bit weak, but...
No, all of those films are actually set on Christmas Day.
And for me, Die Hard actually does resonate with the feeling of Christmas, because around Christmas, a lot of us want to cause harm to people in offices.
Yes, that's true.
If you've been to one of those parties, you're like, oh, if only someone would turn up and Gruber this place.
We did forget about Die Hard 2, which is also set at Christmas, and I think that's a coincidence too far. You know, I don't mind that John McClane gets involved in exactly the same scenario 2 years running, but I do mind. He alludes to it. He says, "How can the same beep happen to the same guy twice?" But on Christmas Day, I think I can no longer suspend my disbelief at that point.
It's too far.
Too far.
You guys are both children of the 80s, am I right? Because your selection is very 80s heavy.
Yes, well, that would be why.
That's you have the affinity to that. For me,
I haven't watched a film since 1991.
You weren't watching all those films when you were a small child.
Why not?
Though. Yeah.
Some of them looked unsavoury, and
No, some of them were not around when I was a small child, to be fair.
Die Hard 2 was shown on ITV, and they used to put the news in the middle. They bleeped out the keyword.
Yes.
They yippied, but they didn't do the rest of it.
Yeah, the yippee-ki-yay, Father Christmas, or whatever he says. Any other films that I've missed out of that top 10?
Home Alone.
Home Alone. Yeah. Now, it's interesting. I actually prefer Home Alone 2, which is also set at Christmas.
With your boy Rob.
Rob Schneider is in there, absolutely.
Bellhop.
And Tim Curry, who is a fantastic actor.
R.I.P.
Yes, no, he's still alive.
I know, but there's like a rumour going around the internet.
No, he's still alive, very much still alive. And Rob Schneider, as you say, and Donald Trump makes an appearance in Home Alone 2.
They cut him out, right?
No, so there were some activists trying to get the directors to make a recut without Donald Trump, and then Macaulay Culkin tweeting saying, I would be all for that. So he's a revisionist. He's a Stalinist. Who knew?
Sensitivity meters for Trump
Yes,
films.
absolutely.
No, it's more surely he realises that if they do an edit, it gets shown, he gets a little bit of kickback in the residual.
You think that's what it is?
Yeah, that's all right. No, he's worth £1 billion. Macaulay Culkin, my hero. Want more.
OK, have you seen Home Alone 3?
No, I refuse, because Macaulay Culkin's not in it, and I'm a purist.
You're an
This is the
absolute
bit where he
purist.
says, how can the same beep happen to the same... No, actually, no, that's not the Home Alone.
No.
That's the other one.
He should say it in the third one.
He should.
How should it... But say, how can the same thing happen to the same guy thrice? But for some reason, I don't think that works, because people don't use the word thrice enough.
No, and by the fifth version of the Die Hard
films... Is there a word for that?
But no, but by then he should be, yeah, this happens to me. He should have just worked it out by now.
OK, well, I think we've covered the movies. What about Christmas TV? I mean, is there anything that people particularly like to watch? I mean, there's the King's Speech, obviously, which probably people are going to watch. What else?
My brother always watched The Three Amigos.
The Three Amigos?
Yeah, that's a go-to. I think. I appreciate it's not set at Christmas and it's not Christmassy, but it's always on at Christmas.
No, it's set at summer in Mexico, I think.
Yes.
Annoyingly, it's a way better Steve Martin enjoyable film than Mixed Nuts. No offence, but that is not a good...
no, really?
No, I agree that Mixed Nuts isn't the best of Steve Martin's films. I just think it's festive and I really like Madeleine Kahn. So I think that was all I was getting at there. But let's not have a row about it, Steve. I don't think, you know...
It's Christmas.
I mean, Three Amigos is a wonderful film, just not festive. It's strange that has become your sort of festive choice.
Yeah, well, I think it's a light-hearted bit of fun. It's a childhood film that didn't disappoint me when I watched it as an adult.
Yeah, those are rare.
Not to hold up, but actually there's jokes in it that you don't get when you're little that come around for adulthood.
Those are very rare. Isn't it interesting that that's like your Christmas tradition? Because I find often, whenever I stay at some other family for Christmas, they've always got weird traditions that I don't understand what's going on. I feel like I'm going slightly insane. Does that not happen to you guys?
Of course, every family has its own wacky old things.
Yeah.
So my mum was, she'd get like a hot teaspoon, make it really hot, and then just put it on me and tell me not to be ungrateful.
Because that's just what you do in your household at Christmas. It's when they do it to the guests that I think people complain.
I just remember The Snowman. That's a great movie. When he melts at the end, that's so sad.
The Snowman, yes, absolutely. But then the same writer, Raymond Williams, wasn't it?
Father Christmas TV show.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of the When the Wind Blows, which was about an elderly couple who die in a nuclear holocaust.
Oh, yeah.
So he didn't do... And I watched that as a kid.
He loved people melting.
No, I loved The Snowman as a kid. So then I watched When the Wind Blows, and then the elderly couple, they make a shelter, and you think they're going to be OK, and they just die.
They're just a mattress against the wall. How do you not
know.
see the death coming?
But why would you let...
stop the neutrons?
Look, I think watching extreme violence as a child is much better for you than watching that kind of psychological torture. And I don't know why I'm pointing at you like it's your fault, Cressida.
Well, you're right. I didn't watch very much violence at all as a child. I'm weak.
And look at you now.
Radicalised. State of me.
Whereas look at me. I'm burly and butch and should have been in the Territorial Army.
Terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. OK. Well, I think we've pretty much covered the entertainments for this year. But we do have 3 amazing prizes that are guaranteed to be won by one lucky viewer in our Great British giveaway. It's very exciting. £10,000 cash and vouchers. And if you haven't entered yet, why on earth not? It's so easy. And here's how you go about it.
You really could be the winner of the very first Great British giveaway and receive nearly £12,000 worth of prizes from us. First, we've got a simply stunning £10,000 in tax-free cash to give you. Cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, how about a new phone? You'll also get a brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max. And if all of that wasn't enough, how about a further £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at the store of your choice? For another chance to win the iPhone, the vouchers and £10,000 cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB01, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 5th of January. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
And next on the Saturday Night Showdown, we'll be discussing a passion of mine, free speech. Baroness Claire Fox will be here to discuss where we are and what can be done to protect free speech in 2024. Please do not go anywhere.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're late! Get up!
This Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, wake up with GB News.
For the finest festive start to your Christmas for you and the whole family.
Christmas breakfast on GB News, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day from 6 a.m.
I got you this.
Oh, good. OK, I got you a little something.
Oh, I'm sure it's nice.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. As you may or may not know, I present a show on GB News every Sunday called Free Speech Nation. We're having a week off for Christmas, so I wanted to use this chance to catch up with one of my favourite guests, Baroness Claire Fox, and see what she is hoping to see in 2024. Good evening, Claire. Thanks so much for joining me. I want to ask you specifically about free speech. You've been such a champion of free speech over the years, and now you continue to do so from the House of Lords. But tell us, where are we at with free speech at the moment? Because every now and then I feel that we're making progress, and sometimes I feel we're regressing. Do you think I've cause to be optimistic generally?
So I want to say that we should be optimistic because in some ways, many of the issues that you and I would have worried about, where we thought that people didn't notice that there was a clampdown on free speech, for example, around the issues of gender or sex, or indeed things that were happening on campus have almost spilt out onto the streets, and therefore more people have seen them. You know, whether that was during the Black Lives Matter period, the issue of decolonization, which seemed like one of those tiny little things, has suddenly become a massive issue because of what's happening in relation to Israel and Gaza and so on. And therefore, you could say more people know about it, more people will be up in arms. However, this is the downside. The downside is that these days, if you say to somebody that's censorship, they say, so what? You know, there is no longer an assumption that being for free speech is a positive value in society, even in a democracy. So I think that we have to be on our guard. And even, I mean, I know you were on a panel that I chaired on the culture wars. whether the culture wars is an irrelevance, so a discussion we had at the Battle of Ideas Festival. So many people say to me, oh, the thing is, the culture wars is just superficial, it's bound to fizzle out, it's going to go away, it's overblown, we've seen the end of it. Actually, if anything, it's becoming more entrenched, deeper, and more sinister. And so, although I'm optimistic about the fact that more people realise there's a crisis of free speech, I'm not as optimistic that we can be complacent unless we have shows like yours, organisations like my own, the Academy of Ideas, and we're constantly on the lookout for ways of explaining to new generations why free speech is so important to them.
I think that's one of the concerns I have, is that I always like to stick up for the younger generation and say that they're not as censorious and authoritarian as everyone thinks. But then these surveys keep coming out that show that a lot of the younger generation do support censorship, particularly on university campus. Do you think that's the problem, really, that people at universities are being told that censorship is a good thing?
Well, it's starting much earlier, I'm afraid. I mean, I think that schools have become responsible for, on the one hand, pandering often to young people. If there's a crisis of adult authorities in many ways. Young people have always been thought that they knew it all, but the role of adults was to say, no, you don't, or to at least challenge them and not to affirm every single, bit of ignorance that they've come out with. These days, it's become more fashionable for adults to kind of think, oh, well, what do we know? This is a new generation of radicals who are so insightful, and they understand the massive world of online issues and how can we say anything? And that's one of the problems, that if you look in schools ever earlier than even university, you'll find that teachers are intimidated by pupils who'll say we should decolonize the curriculum. And instead of saying, what are you talking about? I'm here to pass on the best that's known and thought. And they sort of go, oh, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned and traditional. So I think that crisis is one that my generation and younger generations have made. And the very young generations are suffering the consequence of a failure for us to, in some ways, face down their ignorance. There are some worrying aspects of this that are not just because sometimes people say to me, oh, Claire, you're always going on about free speech, but it sounds so abstract. There's a cost of living crisis. People have got there's wars going on. What about climate change and so on? But I think that we can see in a very visible way in relation to what's happened with Israel and Gaza, that, there are consequences to these things, right? And you're asking what I think about 2024. One of my major dilemmas at the moment is the absolutely rotting vicious anti-Semitism that we've seen openly expressed in Western countries, in the UK, all in the name, by the way, of decolonization. And I immediately want to say, sack that person, clamp down on that phrase, ban that demonstration, because I'm so concerned myself at what we're seeing, which is explicit racism on the street. And yet we've got to hold our nerve. Because actually, the reason we know that anti-Semitism exists is precisely because people have been free to talk about it, exhibit their bigotry, so that we can confront them. But it's based, that bigotry, often on a very ill-informed understanding of what's happening in the Middle East, let alone historically the significance of what anti-Semitism means. I mean, I saw today, you're all looking Christmassy, and I've been discussing Christmassy films. I've got a very dull background, because I'd put my laptop away for Christmas, but then I decided it was more important to go out. Christmas bedlam happening downstairs. But people are out Christmas shopping today, and the next minute there's an attempt at shouting and screaming at Zara, the clothes shop, on the basis that somehow this is associated with somebody who has been pro-Israel. I mean, if you had a sense of historical specificity, you would know that trying to close down shops on the basis that it's got some association with Jews isn't a good look. It's associated with a very dark period in history. Shouting the word genocide at anything and everything that's a nasty war, a vicious war, but calling it a genocide, all of these terms have very specific historic meaning. And I know that you are a great supporter of encouraging people to understand history, where these things come from, so that you might at least pause when you kind of casually wander into an anti-Semitic trope.
So that's something that I think is very interesting. I think a lot of us have been tested in recent weeks in terms of our commitment to liberal values, because, as you say, there are people there trying to shut down shops. There are authoritarians, and I've been a little bit troubled that a lot of the people on the free speech side have almost abandoned some of their principles and said, well, the only solution to authoritarianism is another form of authoritarianism. In other words, sack university lecturers who are supportive of Israel or Palestine, or whichever way you want to go. So how do we retain our resolve when it comes to, as you say, seeing these awful declarations that none of us really want to see in the public square?
Well, I think that I've taken some heart from an American organisation, so I just want to make sure I get it right, which is FIRE, and it stands for the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. And they're a fantastic free speech organisation in America who have really held their nerve in relation to those instances of university leaders who, if you remember, suddenly discovered that they were interested in free speech when asked if the calling for the genocide of Jews might be a problem, right? And they kind of all started saying, well, we believe in free speech. And of course, we were all screaming, lots of screaming, absolute hypocrisy, because these people have been the most censorious in terms of American university campuses. The people who have suddenly discovered free speech as a virtue, for example, the University Union, which has been trying to close down gender-critical feminist academics for some time, but suddenly when it comes to Israel-Palestine, say, how dare you, and so on and so forth. It's very frustrating to see that double standard. But on the other hand, think of the consequence of those of us who know that the importance of an open mind, free expression, being able to argue things out in a rational way. If we become endorsers of giving the authorities the right to close things down on the basis that speech is dangerous. And we have to be very clear on that. Now, that doesn't mean, for example, that the state shouldn't have their eye on people who are explicitly supporting Islamism. And I wish that the police would clamp down where there's anti-Semitic harassment and abuse, which is different, by the way, to free speech. But to just simply say that a slogan itself should mean that you're arrested or that any demonstration should be stopped, I am nervous of. Where on that demonstration somebody's climbing all over, public buildings, then, take them away, right? That's fine with me. That, in a way, is a public order problem. It's not the same as speech crimes. And I think we've seen, we're looking ahead, but one of the things that's going to happen in 2024, could happen, would be that Ireland would bring in this absolutely incredibly draconian hate speech legislation, which actually I'm hoping might get kicked down the road. It's in the equivalent of the Irish Lords in their Senate, and they keep putting it off a bit. But I mean, that gives the authorities incredible power to police your phones, your WhatsApp messages, even if somebody sends you a message which is considered to be hateful, you can be arrested for that. All of these sort of things are happening in the name of clamping down on hate speech. So even when I hear hate speech, I have to remember that ultimately the best way to deal with so-called hate speech, which is open to interpretation, because I'm accused of hate speech, you're accused of hate speech, we're accused of being transphobic, or because we don't go along with critical race theory, you might be accused of being racist. All of these things are accusations leveled at us. We have to remember that giving the state or the authorities the power to label things as hate and then clamp down on them will mean that we're all silenced. And that's a very dangerous situation.
Absolutely excellent point, Claire. Thank you ever so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate it.
Happy Christmas. I am having a good time, really.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. Get some decorations up. So, very interesting points raised by Claire there. I mean, I think she's right to mention specifically the Irish hate crime bill, hate speech bill, which I think is absolutely terrifying. I mean, they're talking about, you know, they can confiscate your phones and your computers if you might have material that could be used to stir up hatred.
And I was listening to that thinking about what I might text Jonathan if it came in here and I could get people in. I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, keep your clothes on this time, for God's sake.
I could cause that much trouble. It just seems absolutely bonkers.
That's right. I hadn't thought of it that way. You could actually...
Well, if we all did it, they'd have... there comes a point where it wouldn't mean anything anymore. They'd be so busy trying to arrest everybody.
The problem is that the politicians in Ireland are sort of saying there's no way this is going to be weaponised. Common sense will prevail. Yeah, of course.
Where have we heard that before?
They've put the concept of hatred and they've legislated it. It's on the statute book, or they want to put it on the statute books. When asked what is the definition of hatred, they say, oh, it's anything that is hateful. They use this sort of weird, circular... complete circular definition. So activists are bound to weaponise it, aren't they, Steve?
Yeah, and it's wrong to be in this world where we're having the dichotomy of hate versus free speech, because that's not what the argument should be about.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the best reasons to attack free speech is because it's used as an excuse by people who are trying to do some hate.
Yes.
But that's not a good enough excuse. I remember, I was just sat there thinking, the first episode you did of Free Speech Nation, I had the pleasure of being on, indeed the week before, when we did a test launch.
Yeah, rehearsal, yeah.
And back then, naive Steve, I think I was just saying, yeah, free speech is really good, it's just absolutely great. The reason people don't value it now is because no one seems to remember what it's like to have the other kind of clampdown on free speech. Not the one that you think is getting rid of some hate, the one that actually means that you can't have good stuff on TV.
Absolutely.
The Mary Whitehouse stuff, the church telling you you can't think that about round earths. That kind of clampdown is the reason that you need free speech. But there's nothing fueling that part of the argument anymore.
Absolutely right. I think free speech is just so fundamental. Jonathan, I don't want you to speak, sorry. Now, next on the Saturday Night Showdown, this week the government released their guidance on school children who want to transition, and we're going to discuss what they came up with. This is the Saturday Night Showdown. Don't go away!
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Teachers in England have been told they do not have to address pupils in their chosen pronouns under new government guidance on how best to support transgender students. The draft document, released by the Department of Education, states in the absence of preferred pronouns, the child's preferred name should be used, with schools having a duty to ensure bullying is never tolerated. So to discuss this development, I'm joined by the journalist and author Helen Joyce. Helen, thanks so much for joining us. This guidance is long overdue, isn't it? And it's absolutely necessary.
Yes, this guidance has been under development since 2017. It was originally tasked to the Equality and Human Rights Commission under its previous management, which was very, very trans activist. Very connected with Stonewall. There was a leaked document that really totally misrepresented the law and suggested that children could really change sex, and that if a child said they were a member of the opposite sex, it was the school's legal duty to go along with that. And that was withdrawn and never actually published formally. And since then, that's been a hot potato in Westminster. It's been bounced around. It went back to the Department for Education. We went through several ministers. The Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, is the person who has pushed it. Number 10 has come and gone in different positions on it. And finally, more than 6 years later, this document has come out. And in the meantime, of course, lots and lots of children have been transitioned at school. And the trans sort of social epidemic has spread for 6 years unchecked. And the people who have misrepresented the law to teachers have been free to do so. So to say it's long overdue doesn't even really capture the problem.
Now, how watertight is the guidance? Because, for instance, the lawyer Robin Moira Wright was on GB News saying that it was unlawful and that actually schools have effectively saying schools have no responsibility to provide, for instance, single-sex spaces such as toilets and the like. Is that incorrect?
Robin Moira White. So there's a lot of misrepresentations in what White says, I'm sorry to say. It's non-statutory guidance, so that's the first thing. But the second thing to say is that it goes through the legal basis for the points that it makes. And so a teacher or a school that decides to ignore that legal basis, even though it's non-statutory guidance, will be ignoring statutory duties. So, for example, there is, despite what White says, a legal duty to provide single-sex toilets from age 8 in English schools and changing rooms and showers, if those are offered at all, single-sex from age 11. And there's no wiggle room on that. Children under 18 can't get a gender recognition certificate, so their legal sex is, in all circumstances, the same as their biological sex.
So have schools understood that?
And the same is true for the records.
I mean, have schools...
No, because they need to.
Right.
Honestly, lobby groups have been going around telling them that the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, which is something completely different, it's thinking that you want to be a member of the opposite sex in some respect, like that's not the formal wording. They've been saying that if a child has that protected characteristic, you must treat them as if they're the opposite sex. And you absolutely mustn't. There's many, many statutory duties on schools that require them to pay attention to children's sex.
Now, you mentioned the idea of a social contagion, and I want to ask you specifically about that, because some people, for instance, the Interim Caste Review, suggested that social transitioning, as in using the preferred pronouns and the preferred names of children, that it's not a neutral act. So that being the case, should this have gone further? Should the guidance have said that there shouldn't be any social transitioning whatsoever, because that will just add to this idea of a contagion?
So Sex Matters, the organisation that I work for, has done a full analysis of the various laws and duties that bind on schools, because they go a lot beyond the Equality Act. They include safeguarding principles, for example. Every education professional has a legal duty to safeguard children. And we think that if you take in the round all the laws and regulations that bind on schools, they can never pretend that a child is a member of the opposite sex. That is not the interpretation of the expensive lawyers that the government turned to, as far as we can tell from the leaks. But I think those lawyers were, myopically looking just at equality law, and they don't understand anything about how you run a school. So what they've ended up with is a strange sort of muddle. There's really good stuff in there, but they've got this weird muddle where they understand that you must have school rules with no exception that insist that only girls can use the girls' spaces and only boys can use the boys' spaces, and not one child in the whole of Britain in any circumstances should be thought of as a member of the opposite sex, and that's legally sound. And then they say that in some circumstances you might refer to a child as a member of the opposite sex. Well, you may have noticed that school rules are written in words. So how can you have a school rule that says to a boy, you're not allowed into the girls' toilets, but by the way, you're a special sort of boy that we call a girl? This is just not coherent, and we hope to tighten it up in the process of consultation.
I mean, you've got to feel sorry for the teachers in all of this, because a lot of this guidance was surely to make lives easier for them, right?
And for school leaders, it's school leaders who carry the legal responsibility here. It's been a gross dereliction of duty by the Department for Education not to put this out a lot earlier. It's left around 30,000 schools around Britain trying to make decisions in this complex area under pressure from teachers, activists, some activist teachers as well, and making those decisions in a space where they know they're quite likely to get sued by people on both sides, by parents who want their children to transition. They want their boy to be treated as a girl or vice versa, and other parents saying under no circumstances do this. I should say I really am impressed that Kemi Badenoch got it to this point. I understand that it's her who has made it as tough as and clear as it is. I think that in the end, we're going to have to get to the point that we say, no boy can be a girl, and you're going to have to say that in your language. If people want to change their names, that's fine. But you can't pretend boys are girls or girls are boys and keep all children safe. And that is the primary duty of schools.
So finally on that, how will that be achieved? I've already said that some lawyers are saying that this is unlawful guidance. Some are suggesting that by the end of the consultation period it will change and it will be watered down. Stonewall has come out and they're not happy at all with this guidance. So there's a lot of powerful lobbying groups and activist groups who are determined to have this unpicked and pulled apart and that it won't be applied. So how do you deal with that? How do we ensure that actually it does go through and is as rigorous as it needs to be?
I mean, the stuff about spaces and sports having to be single sex is so clearly worked and it's so obviously based on statutory responsibilities on schools that it's amazing to me that that was ever ignored in the first place. I think all these teachers who are mouthing off under anonymous accounts on Twitter saying that they're not going to follow this guidance, like once they get into their mind that actually that's going to have them up before the professional bodies on fitness to practice and that they're going to lose their jobs, I think that that's just, that's Saturday night bravado, isn't it? So I think it's that. I think it's the fact that it gives its legal workings. And, the trans activist groups, they've really worked very well in the shadows. They've managed to present all these misrepresentations when nobody was looking. And now that it's out in the cold light of day and it's written down, I think all these people are really going to have second and third thoughts. And also, finally, I would say that school leaders are often much less activist than the activist teachers. They're quite sensible people generally, because they tend to be the people who have to get the insurance policy and who talk to the legal counsel about what the school is doing. I think that this actually will stick pretty well.
Well, Helen, thanks so much for taking us through that. It's very complicated. Really appreciate it. Have a really great Christmas, by the way.
You too, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
I think it is really important that this guidance has now come out, and it is long overdue, isn't it, Cressida? Because I've spoken to teachers who are so confused, and they've been confused for years as this stuff. Luckily, when I was a teacher, none of this was there. It has happened very rapidly.
Oh, it must be horrendous for teachers trying to walk this tightrope of not upsetting people.
Yeah, exactly.
What I really like about this is that the government spent 6 years writing this guidance, and their conclusion was teachers should call kids their names.
Yeah, I mean, that is effectively
6 years, however much money.
But Jonathan, there is an issue here, is actually like if a pupil is threatening to cause harm to themselves, if you don't use the pronouns that they want to use, if you end up being compelled to do this,
That becomes, I guess, a safeguarding issue for the child's safety.
Of course it's a safeguarding issue, but teachers do have to face this kind of thing on a daily basis.
But they've not gone far enough in that, yes, the conclusion is you should call children by their names, but if actually you make it call them by their surnames, like old schools.
That's a
you
really...
don't need a pronoun, you don't need a preferred name. Jenkins! And you've got it sorted.
That is actually a brilliant idea, although they never used to do that with girls, did they?
Oh, they did at my school.
Oh, did they?
Well, we had this one maths teacher, Mr. Hay.
Really?
Yeah, he used to make us sit in alphabetical order, and I had to sit next to my friend Russ White. He used to say, Miss Wetton, Mr. White, we're not here to smile. He did.
We're not here to smile?
That was his catchphrase, yeah.
What a miserable man. That's very funny. Well, anyway, thank you, Wetton. I really appreciate that. OK, so anyway, still to come on the Saturday Night Showdown, I will ask my panel how they would spend their perfect Christmas and what they're actually doing. See you in a moment.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. We're almost done for the evening, but there's plenty of time left to ask my wonderful panel what makes the perfect Christmas in their opinion. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we all have different needs and objectives at this time of year.
No, I say keep it classic.
Really? What's
Don't
that?
Try and freestyle. Well, get as close to a John Lewis advert as you can, although you probably haven't got that many beautiful friends, but maybe you have, I don't know.
I certainly have.
Well, go for that.
And relatives, because they share my DNA.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
yes.
What will you be doing for Christmas, Cressida?
I'll be with family. I'll be in Bristol.
OK.
Opening presents and eating and doing what, you know, the classic.
The classic sort of thing. You don't have any strange traditions in your family?
No, we go for a walk.
Oh, that's quite nice and normal, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite good. But Christmas is all about the kids, isn't it? Do you have any Rugrats
Well, no, there's
around?
no kids around.
So that's even better.
So we have to use alcohol as a substitute.
Nothing wrong with that. What's your tipple?
What's available? Port.
Port.
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's Christmas Day, isn't
Well,
it?
I think you can't beat a good creme de menthe at Christmas.
No, Andrew, no.
No? No? Is that vulgar?
Well, once upon a time, I was given a milkshake made of ice cream and creme de menthe. Same friend, actually, Ross White, funnily enough.
That sounds grotesque.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, OK, we'll say no more of that.
You weren't there to smile, Wetton, so...
No, no. Your friend has been radicalised, Wetton.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what are you going to do for Christmas?
I think you're totally wrong about this. It's not about tradition. Traditions are the problem with Christmas.
Really? Why?
That's where the stress comes from, and then that's where the problems are. I was in a shop the other day, and I was behind. I had to listen to the conversation the person had when they were being served. This is why self-scan's better. Move it on.
Yes.
But she was talking to the cashier, and she said, "I've got to go and get Twiglets after this because my daughter said it's not Christmas without Twiglets." It is, but now you've given yourself pressure to find Twiglets, and if you don't find them...
That's how religion started.
Exactly.
Yes, that's
and
right.
You get people who think, I've got to get the sprouts right or I'll have ruined Christmas. No, you ruin Christmas by crying about sprouts in the kitchen again. Maybe I'm going into my backstory a bit there. But...
I like the framework. Then I know what to do.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you fail at that, then all of a sudden it's a big deal.
Do you like the non-attachment idea? You like to not be attached and just go with the flow?
I totally agree with the Marks and Spencer advert this year. That's about if there's a tradition you don't like.
No, they destroy all the Christmas cards and the cakes.
The Christmas cards.
It's outrageous.
Oh, my
It's
goodness.
a brave thing to do when you're a shop that makes a big chunk of its money from selling Christmas stuff, and they went, if you don't like it, don't.
I think it's
I'm going to join
foolhardy.
the boycott that's happening in Oxford Circus right now.
Absolutely. What do you, Jonathan? What do you do for Christmas? Do you celebrate Christmas?
I do. Like any day, I get up around sort of 10ish, have a 2-hour Thai massage. Generally, that's just how I like to start my day.
Yeah.
And end it if possible, if the budget permits. But yeah, I'm going to go to my family's place. Well, actually, my brother-in-law's place, and we're all going, my parents and everything. And we're going to be there. My little nephew's there. He's 3. Bought lots of presents. He's so sweet.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
OK, so then you'll have a nice family Christmas.
I think so, yeah. We'd like to play Articulate, but no one wants to play with me.
Be very, very careful with Articulate because people have rows. They really do fall out.
Are you good? I can imagine you're pretty good.
I'm pretty good at it, but I've been known to flip the board.
Oh, OK.
Yeah, in certain circumstances, particularly when I've had a few creme de menthes.
Oh, all right.
So, I mean, no, not ideal at all.
No, OK, well,
but what we're all talking about... The one thing we've conspicuously not mentioned is the birth of Jesus Christ. Why is that?
It's already happened. We can't do that again this time.
Oh, yeah, OK, I forgot. I forgot that's been done. But, but there is an argument, isn't there, that the true meaning of Christmas has been basically overshadowed with commercialism and the idea we've got to buy as much as possible for people.
But you said the same thing about Black Friday. You could say that's all about the commercialism now.
But was Black Friday originally a religious festival that's been corrupted?
No, Jonathan's making a joke. I had to Google this the other day because we did a story on it. There is no connection between Black Friday and anything other than commercial stuff.
Is that right?
That is correct.
But Easter suddenly became about that rabbit thing.
Yes.
And there's no way that he was there on Calvary. No.
What I've worked out, though, is that if we celebrated the birth of Jesus near the actual birth, which was in January, the shops wouldn't be busy because Christmas is already gone. So, solved it.
Yep. Well, Steve solves everything. That's why we have him here. That is it for the Saturday Night Showdown. But keep here, please, because Ben Leo is next with Tonight Live. He's got plenty of festive fun lined up. Thanks so much for watching, and a very Merry Christmas to all our wonderful GB News viewers.
God bless us, everyone.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Looking towards Christmas, and it's looking like it's staying cloudy and damp for most of us, with temperatures generally above average for the time of year. Low pressure continues to sit out towards the northwest, slowly bringing frontal systems across the UK through the rest of the weekend and in towards the Christmas period. Heavy rain that's been across parts of western Scotland gradually starts to ease, but turns heavier across western parts of Wales. We could see up to 80 millimetres here, and generally quite a cloudy picture for much of England and Wales. Some clearer spells further north, but blustery showers pushing in from the west and feeling a little bit chillier here. However, it'll be much milder further south with perhaps 11 or 12 degrees. So a very mild, cloudy and damp start for much of England and Wales on Christmas Eve. Rain continues to spread its way eastwards as we head in towards the afternoon. Some sunshine across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England and Scotland, but plenty of blustery showers around, and some very strong winds across northeast England, perhaps up to 70 miles an hour. Temperatures still above average across the board, perhaps 13 or 14 degrees. To start on Christmas Day, another wet and cloudy picture for much of England and Wales. Heavy rain spreads in from the west, slowly clearing its way eastwards as we go through the day. Further north, there will be some brighter spells, but another band of rain pushes its way northwards into parts of Scotland, perhaps bringing some snow to some high ground. Looking drier and brighter on Boxing Day, but further wet and windy weather on the way.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar. sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night